We're in the middle of a really important conversation in this country about race. And as a result, a lot of book clubs are thinking about reading books on the topic of race. But there are a few things you should keep in mind before you leap into a discussion on race with your book club. What I'm going to focus on today is advice for white members of book clubs. Whether you're a member of an all-white book club or you happen to be lucky enough to have some racial diversity in your book club, this advice is really for the white members of the book club, things to think about. So one thing may be that the black and brown members of your book club may be really tired of talking about race with white people. So don't expect that they're necessarily going to be excited and enthusiastic about this idea. They might be really invested in having this conversation in their book club, but it's also possible that they might be tired of talking about it. So anticipate that and pay attention to how the people of color in your book club are feeling about the book choice. And then don't expect them to lead the discussion. In fact, discussions about race can be really difficult and painful at times, and you might want to consider hiring a professional facilitator for these discussions. Ask around at your local college, at your local library, ask teachers you know, ask your neighbors, and see if you can find somebody in the community who already has experience in leading conversations about race. The second thing is to think about what kind of a book you want to read. Are you interested in nonfiction that's literally about race and to open up a conversation about race in your book club? Or are you interested in fiction by a black writer or an Asian writer, a writer of color who maybe hasn't gotten as much attention in the media as some other writers have? If you're going to read fiction, though, be really careful that you're not choosing a book with what's known as a white savior theme or protagonist. These are books that, first of all, tend to be written by white people about black people. And furthermore, the protagonist, the white savior in the story, is a white person who comes in and solves the black people's problems. So an example of this would be the classic To Kill a Mockingbird, which is still on a lot of school reading lists. It's a great story, a lot of people love it, but it is not the right starting place for your book club to have a conversation specifically about race. Another example of this would be the book The Help, which was really popular when it came out, but then faced some backlash for exactly the same reason. It's centered on the white person's experience of helping someone who's black. And so these may be books that you would enjoy reading together, but they're certainly not the right starting point for your book club to have a conversation on the topic of race. When it's time to actually have your discussion, check your ego at the door. You may hear things that rub you the wrong way, or that surprise you, or shock you, or disturb you, or upset you. Try to sit back and listen. Try to think for yourself about what you're feeling, and don't just leap to the first response that you have to the conversation. Probably if you're willing to have this discussion in your book club, you're already open to hearing other people's views and to thinking about them. But it's a good reminder that what's being said in these discussions isn't to be taken personally. It's a larger issue to really think carefully about and to think about what you can do as a white person in this country at this time. Normally, I tell book clubs that I think they should skip the discussion guides in the back of the books. They tend not to be very well written. They tend to ask questions that are fairly self-evident, but in this case, I would recommend using the discussion guide, especially if you're reading a nonfiction book written in the last few years on the subject of race. It may be more likely to have some good questions or just some thought-provoking questions that you wouldn't necessarily have come up with yourself. This is also one time when it might be good to have a follow-up discussion. You might find that after the discussion you have about race in your book club, things come up as people are thinking about the conversation in the weeks or the month that follows the meeting. So you might want to actually schedule in a follow-up conversation at your next meeting to see what people have been thinking about and whether any new questions or issues or concerns have come up. Be sure in particular that you're listening to the people of color in your book group, that you're hearing what they're saying about their own experiences, and that they have an opportunity to follow up on what other people have said that maybe they've been thinking about as well. Above all, just recognize that no one book is going to give you a full experience of or understanding of this big, long history that we have in this country of racial injustice. And so you're going to want to keep reading. Even if your book club doesn't keep scheduling books on this topic, think about what you as a reader might read. What might you do to diversify your own reading, not only in terms of nonfiction about race itself, but also in terms of reading books by people of color whose experiences may differ from your own. You may be surprised at how much that opens up your ideas about what's happening today and what our friends and neighbors and family members of color need from us. Keep on reading, and I'll see you next time on Better Book Clubs.